All aboard for Natchez, Cairo, and St. Louis.
I do not know much about gods, but I think that the river is a strong brown god, sullen, untamed, and intractable, patient to some degree, at first recognized as a frontier, useful, untrustworthy as a conveyor of commerce, then only a problem confronting the builder of bridges. The problem once solved, the brown god is almost forgotten by the dwellers in cities, ever, however, implacable, keeping his seasons and rages, destroyer, reminder of what men choose to forget. Unhonored, unpropitiated by worshippers of the machine, but waiting, watching and waiting.
Oh, baby, I got news for you. Pearls from Missouri, too. So naturally, I got my doubts. You got 'em dropping by the...
For Eliot, in all kinds of important ways, I think he found London really liberating. It actually liberated his life. It was refreshing. He doesn't feel like an exile. He actually feels like he's coming home when he comes to London. He's actually returning to this sense of roots and ancestry and genealogy that his family had drummed into him from early childhood. But by a certain kind of ironic twist, it's actually by returning to those much older origins that he actually escapes the much more immediate origins and discovers originality. In many ways, it's a fresh start. He is a blank slate, and he can write his own life and his own identity onto it.
Heaven's worry scurries to earth, twisty planning, what's to block it? At sight of a good plan, they turn to rotten again. The sight of their planning gives me a pain. First say yes, then say no, good plan, no go. But a rotten they dress in flummery. The sight of their planning worries me.
Eliot met the great modernist poet Ezra Pound shortly after he arrived in London in 1914. Pound instantly recognised his talent and began to promote his work.
When he first saw Prufrock, he was blown away by it, and he just thought this was the best new poem he'd seen by an American in his lifetime. And he insisted to the editor, Harriet Munro, that she publish it. The love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, here we've got the first printing of one of the most significant poems of the 20th century. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table, which that third line has been said to be where modern poetry starts.
Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells.
Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit.
Thanks. Okay. The introduction. T.S. Eliot's first poem, first published poem. Any poem startles you by the introduction. How are we startled? How are we brought into the poem here?
Like a patient etherized upon a table, it presents a contrast with the title, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing you would find in a traditional love song, which makes us seem that something's not quite right within the poem.
To compare the evening sky or to, like a patient lying on a table unconscious it's really weird. Just to like have that idea when looking at the sky is very strange and very kind of a bit worrying, really.
Yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains. Let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys.
Let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys. Slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep.
As it is smoke, it does seem quite suffocating, so it seems to maybe suffocate people it's passing on the streets, and maybe it sort of brings back that idea of being trapped, feeling trapped.
I think it gives quite a kind of slimy, almost gross impression with, well, the first licked its tongue and then lingered upon the pools that stand in the drains. It's very kind of gross and slimy and creepy and...
Okay, right. So I think the majority seems to have this as a sort of sinister and slightly unnerving sort of creature metaphor.
I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me.
For decades, I was the boy who read Prufrock for the first time with the assistance of schoolmaster. It was only, maybe 10, 12 years ago that I read it again and became breathless. I think, my goodness, the melodies, the beauty, the strangeness, what he did with this melody at this time, the kind of sweetness of a late 19th century music, combined with the 20th century townscape, landscape, all that they say in the books about this. It took me a long time for it to swim into me and for me to be alone with it.
I have seen them riding seaward on the wave, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and flat. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown.
Dancing teacher, show me how to do the foxtrot. You've got to watch your step. I have to watch my step. Won't you kindly show me how to...
In June 1915, a year after his arrival in England, Eliot was introduced to a lively and attractive young woman called Vivian Haigh Wood. They were both keen dancers and would spend evenings dancing together in London hotels.
Show me.
Then watch me, watch me.
3 months after they met, Eliot married Vivian without even telling his parents, who were furious when they found out. The Eliots rented a small third-floor flat in a newly built block near Baker Street, opposite a pub called the Larrick.
Eliot's family were very angry about his marriage to Vivian, I think for several reasons. Not least because it's one thing to come to London as a young man and to establish a certain amount of artistic credibility, even perhaps sowing a few wild oats. It's the turn of the 20th century. That's what young men did. He's had his kind of grand tour. That's all well and good. But at some point, you are expected to come home, take up your position, take up your role with the family, marry a nice American girl in St. Louis, settle down, and continue the family tradition. So the point at which he marries Vivian is the point at which he's really marking a definitive break with his past in a way that his family clearly found it difficult to deal with.
Eliot found work as a prep school master, but in 1917 he took a more lucrative job in the Colonial and Foreign Department of Lloyd's Bank in the City of London, where he was to remain for the next 9 years. He was responsible for monitoring foreign exchange markets and analysing economic developments in Europe.
He's 29 years old in 1917 when he goes into the bank. In that year, he published Prufrock and Other Observations. He wanted an employment where he would be free when he walked away from the job at the end of the day to write and review and to begin an intellectual and creative life. But he immersed himself in it, and he rose very successfully through the ranks with good raises and became a very valued member of the firm. Had he stayed with the bank, he would have risen to the top of the banking world. He was very successful, and when he made the decision to leave the bank and go to Faber and Faber, it wasn't because Faber and Faber recognized him as a great new literary figure. It was because he was a very effective businessman.
Unreal city, under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many I had not thought death had undone so many. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet. Flowed up the hill and down King William Street, to where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours with a dead sound on the final stroke of 9.
After America entered the war in April 1917, Eliot tried to enlist in the US Navy, but was rejected because of poor health, including an abnormally fast heartbeat from which he suffered throughout his life. He observed the final cataclysmic years of the First World War and its aftermath from his desk in Lloyd's Bank, and responded by writing the poem which was to be his masterpiece.
The burial of the dead. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger See with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour.
It seemed a rather mad poem, as a matter of fact. One imagined someone very wild and extreme. I think it was related to the First World War, and I think it was still more related to the mood of depression which followed the First World War. I mean, it very much related to things like the effects of the inflation in Germany, starvation in Austria, revolutions in Hungary and Russia and so on.
It is a poem about fracture, it's a poem about dislocation after the First World War. It's a terrifying poem because it's inside the head of a society, almost a world, which has gone slightly mad. I mean, we can't underestimate the effects of the First World War, and they're not just outside effects, they're inside effects. I mean, people's consciousnesses were shattered and changed forever by what happened in the First World War. And Eliot was the first poet to take all of that in all its chaos and all its fragmentation and say, I can write about this, and here it is.
The Wasteland is a revolutionary work which astounded Eliot's contemporaries and whose meaning is still being debated to this day. It is divided into 5 seemingly unrelated sections and combines everyday speech, popular songs, Wagnerian legend and classical mythology with allusions to writers from Chaucer and Dante to Shakespeare and Dickens.
And I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Frisch weht der Wind der Heimat zu, mein irisch Kind, wo weilest du? You gave me hyacinths first a year ago. They called me the Hyacinth Girl.